Senator Hunt, you're recognized to open on LB34.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I am presenting LB34, which is a bill to implement year-round daylight savings time in Nebraska. I was a co-sponsor of this bill when Senator Breezy introduced it a couple times, when Senator Conrad introduced it, and I'm happy to continue their good work on the issue. I also thank Speaker Arch for scheduling this bill and Senator Merman's bill to implement year-round standard time right after this one. And I think the best thing for us to do is sort of have a discussion about both perspectives, talk about the differences, talk about what our preferences are, and then we can move forward and, we can either adopt my bill or we can do nothing, would be my preference. Just kidding. Maybe we end up doing what Senator Merman wants to do, but I can explain sort of basically what daylight savings time would be. I distributed a chart. There's two charts going around. The one I sent out, it shows what time sunset would be in the winter under daylight savings time. Daylight savings time, the one that I prefer, what LB34 is the one where you have more daylight after work. So, in the fall when you set your clocks back and then all of a sudden it's really dark at night and you're leaving work and you're walking to your car in the dark, this does away with that. You have more daylight after work. You can go to your kids' games, you can go play golf, you can go to restaurants and shops, and it's a better thing for the economy. It's a better thing for things like seasonal depression and just kind of the winter blues that you get when you don't have any sunlight, and that's why I prefer daylight savings time. LB34 would change the official time in Nebraska to remain on daylight savings time year-round, where you have more sunlight in the evening. However, this change would be contingent on a federal law or policy change and the adoption of single year-round daylight savings time by 3 adjacent states. Currently, Colorado and Wyoming have enacted laws supporting permanent daylight savings time, although Congress must act for those laws to go into effect. There's all kinds of studies out there that show evidence of harmful impacts of the time change in general. They show in the period following the time change, there's increases in seizures, there's increases in heart attacks and strokes, car accidents, workplace injuries, lost work days, decreased worker productivity and economic output, and so on. Largely, the research points to the act of changing the clocks twice a year as what causes the problem, more so than one approach or the other. So, you can find, if you can find 100 studies showing that daylight savings time is the best way to go, honestly, you can find 100 studies saying that standard time is the best way to go. So, colleagues, you really just have to decide what your preference is. Do you want it to be darker in the evening, or do you want it to be having more daylight and more sunlight after work? That'll be the question that we are talking about. People with epilepsy and other conditions that cause seizures see a rise in incidence the week after the change. Heart attacks go up as well. A study by the University of Michigan, the University of Colorado, and the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs found a 24% increase in heart attacks the Monday following the time change, and there are other studies showing the same thing. One study in Finland in 2016 found an increase in strokes up 25% the week after the time change. Another study by the University of Colorado showed an increase in car accidents. The University of Oregon found an increase in workplace injuries. There's also a 67% increase in lost work days. So there really is a cost to this. Between medical care and lost work days, sick days, heart attacks, that's not nothing. So I think a strong argument can be made against changing our clocks twice a year. My preference is permanent daylight savings time, so we have more light after work, because this will result in an economic activity increase. More people will be out and about, and an extra hour of daylight during the winter months can yield extra consumer activity, extra spending, and enhance economic activity in our state that's good for Nebraska. A lot of us in the winter, we have trouble tearing ourselves off the couch. to get out of the house during those winter months. And if consumers were more prone to get back out into our community, spend, support businesses, support restaurants and shops, it's good for jobs, it's good for our state revenue, and great to increase foot traffic in those evening hours when it's dark out normally. One really interesting study to me was done by J.P. Morgan Chase in November 2016, and they assessed the economic impact of daylight savings time. They did it by comparing the spending 30 days before and after daylight savings time compared to spending in Phoenix. And in Phoenix, they don't change their clocks in Arizona, so that was sort of their control for this experiment. They found an average credit card spending increase of 2% for the month after daylight savings time, and they found after standard time, spending decreased by 3.5%. So this study shows when you have more daylight, consumer spending increases 2%. When it gets dark and there's no daylight after work, it goes down 3.5%. That's a major economic impact. So we're talking about income, jobs, revenue, and that's not nothing, colleagues. To wrap up, I don't think I need to take the full time. It's pretty straightforward. I see Senator Merman is in the queue next, so he can talk about his perspective, why he prefers standard time. To me, a lot of this is kind of, are you an early bird or a night owl? That's a big thing too. Do you want a lot more sunlight in the morning, or do you want more daylight after work? And that is, I prefer after work because I'm kind of a night owl, and I run a business, and I do see our sales decrease in the winter months correlated to the daylight. People don't really go out and shop when it's dark out. When I got home last night from here about 7:45 or 8, same with yesterday, we start to have longer days and longer committee hearings. And I think about last night, if this was summer and I got home at 7:45, it would still be light out. And maybe I would go, grab some dinner with friends. Maybe I would go get a drink at a bar in my neighborhood. Maybe I would head over to my shop and do some work over there after I get back from the legislature. But in the winter months, when you get home at 7, 6:30, 5:30, and it's dark, you just feel like you have to start getting ready for bed. You feel like, let me get dinner going and let me start getting ready for bed, because that's just sort of like the mood that happens when it's so dark outside. So I was just thinking last night, I wish it was a little brighter outside, and if we pass LB34, that's what we'll have. So happy to answer any questions, happy to clarify. I know it's kind of confusing which is which. LB34, more daylight after work. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Frederickson, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Nebraskans. I rise today. I genuinely don't know how I'm going to vote on this bill or on Senator Merman's bill, and I'm kind of interested to hear more about the debate and hear the different perspectives out there. I actually have a couple questions for Senator Hunt, if she might be willing to yield.
Senator Hunt, will you yield?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Senator Hunt. Thank you. First of all, thank you for bringing this bill. I know you've done a lot of work on this issue, and you've for a long time been pretty vocal in the daylight savings time community. I appreciate hearing from Senator Merman as well and his perspective. This is like a bit more of a logistical question. If both of these bills advance, what exactly happens?
Both bills can't advance. Both bills can advance, to the point of final reading, but we can only pass one. Senator Erdman was texting me jokingly. He said, "Why don't you split the difference and do half an hour?" And so, yeah, we can't obviously set the clock both an hour back and an hour forward, so it's going to be one or the other.
I appreciate that clarification. Thank you for answering questions. It's funny because this has actually sparked, I've had a number of conversations with colleagues on the floor about this very issue already, so I think that there's genuine, split opinions on this, and I'm interested in hearing more about this. I will say I agree with what Senator Hunt said, and I think what Senator Merman said as well. I think if we are going to advance either of these bills, we do need to, as a legislative body, kind of come to some sort of agreement on which one we are going to do. So this is going to be a real test of who are the night owls and who are the early birds in here. So looking forward to the debate, and I will continue to listen. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Hunt, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Jacobson had a great point for both the western and the eastern borders of Nebraska. You know, in western Nebraska, if in a hypothetical, if there was like a 2-hour difference between the borders of Colorado, that would make no sense. Fear not, colleagues. When we pass LB34, that will not be the case because Colorado has passed a bill to implement year-round daylight savings time. And Iowa, on the eastern border of Nebraska, is currently considering a bill similar to LB34. Iowa has not passed permanent standard time, which is like Senator Merman's bill, and Colorado has passed a bill like LB34. So if we want to have parity with our neighbors, LB34 is the bill to support. As far as federal action, I wanted to talk about what needs to happen in Congress, what is happening in Congress. In 2022, the U.S. Senate passed the Sunshine Protection Act, which is like LB34. It would implement year-round daylight savings time, but it was not voted on by the House. So it did not advance out of Congress, but that's the bill that they've considered. There have been continued calls for congressional action on this topic, and President Trump and some of his prominent cabinet members and advisors, such as Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, I don't know how much Ramaswamy's in the mix anymore with President Trump, but both of them have advised permanent daylight savings time, and they've talked about it. If you look at their posts and things they've shared on social media, that's something that the feds are definitely talking about. Over the past 5 years, 20 states have joined this movement, and it's a strong signal for Congress to act. LB34 also allows for an order of authorization by the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, so that could be a possibility as well. If and when something happens at the federal level, colleagues, I know many of you are in conversations, but this is an important point. If something happens on the federal level, Colorado and Wyoming will change their clocks, and we don't want Nebraska to be left behind. Passing the bill now just allows us to be ready if federal action takes place, if those other conditions fall into place where 3 states around us have passed this bill. Iowa is considering it now, so that could certainly be a position that we find ourselves in. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Hunt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. Several people have come up to me asking what other states do, and it would have been smart to distribute a sheet saying what all the other states do so you don't have to listen so intently to hear this, and I have done that. So I have copies over here, but as you know, I have to sign something for distribution, so that's being printed and copied right now, and then you will receive that. If you want to look at it before you get it, I've got a pile of them right over here. But I can tell you, okay, I think Senator Merman misspoke. Colorado and Wyoming have passed permanent daylight savings time legislation like LB34. Colorado and Wyoming have passed bills like LB34. Iowa has a bill pending like LB34. Kansas has a pending bill to exempt the state from daylight savings time unless there's an act of Congress. Missouri has pending bills like both, just like we do in Nebraska. And South Dakota has a pending bill to exempt the state from daylight savings time. So the only 2 states that have passed legislation are Colorado and Wyoming, and they passed bills like LB34. Iowa on the east side is considering a bill like LB34, and I see that sheet getting distributed now. So maybe that will clear some things up for people. One thing I'll say about the studies, thank you. As I said in my opening, you know, if you find 100 studies saying daylight savings time is better, you find 100 saying standard time is better. It seems like from the research, what all researchers agree on is that the time change is what the problem is. In the fall, when you set your clock back and it's darker at night, people have, you know, issues changing with the clock. In the spring, when they set it forward, sometimes they find it harder to wake up in the morning, and people are more likely to call in sick, people are more likely to take time off, and that's totally understandable. We all go through that. So I think, my position obviously is that LB34 is better. It's better to have more daylight in the evening, but most importantly for commerce, for our economy, for truckers and delivery drivers to be going across state lines and having consistency in what the time zones are. LB34 is the best thing for Nebraska because of the states around us that are either considering or have already passed similar legislation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I talked to Senator Hunt and Senator Merman and said, let's schedule these together. Let's talk about them at the same time. We put Senator Hunt's bill up first, but this has kind of been the vehicle that we can discuss this matter. But I have a question, and I will ask this question to both Senator Hunt and Senator Merman, if he would be willing. First of all, Senator Hunt, would you yield to a question?
Senator Hunt, will you yield?
Yes.
So in your bringing this bill, what do you see as the benefit to having this discussion, having the state of Nebraska take a position on this issue, and what government need to do before this could be enacted in the state of Nebraska?
So the federal government has to pass permissive legislation saying that the states can go to permanent daylight savings time. In 2022, the Senate passed that. It did not get voted on by the House. President Trump and Elon Musk have signaled their support for bills like LB34 for permanent daylight savings time, and Colorado and Wyoming have already passed it. And so I think the benefit of us having this conversation and adopting LB34 is to support the economy and commerce and make sure that we're in line with our partners and our neighbors in states around us who have already passed legislation to change the time.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. And I would ask the same question of Senator Merman. What exactly is the benefit of passing one of these as it relates to the federal government?
Senator Merman, will you yield?
Yes. Well, I think Senator Hunt described it well. For LB34 to go into effect, it would take an act of Congress. We can do that. We can pass the bill now, but it would take an act of Congress for it to go into effect. My bill would not take an act of Congress, but my bill does say that 4 surrounding states would have to eliminate daylight savings time. In other words, adopt permanent standard time before my bill would go into effect. And as far as the president goes, I have seen I've definitely heard that President Trump wants to eliminate standard time and go to full-time, eliminate daylight savings time and go to permanent standard time, and I have not seen any information that he's changed his mind on that. I'm not saying Senator Hunt is wrong, but I just haven't seen that information. As far as I know, President Trump, after being elected, said that he wanted to eliminate daylight savings time and go on to permanent standard time.
Thank you, Senator Merman. I would just remind the body that when these now come, and it looks like we'll be coming to a vote soon on LB34, when these come to a vote, we'll be obviously considering them separately, and so we'll vote on LB34, and then we will have the introduction of Senator Merman's bill immediately following that. So just keep that in mind as you cast your votes. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. You're recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, I think we've gone through it. LB34 is a bill to allow Nebraska to enact permanent daylight savings time. That's the time when you have more daylight after work, like in the summer. After work, you can go out for drinks with your friends, you can go to dinner, you can go golfing, and you can stay out later. You can go to your kids' soccer games, and you'll have more daylight to do things like that. As far as federal action, the U.S. Senate passed the Sunshine Protection Act in 2022. It was not voted on by the House, but it has been introduced again this year with bipartisan support. So there is pending federal legislation that would allow LB34 to be enacted. It has bipartisan support, just as LB34 does. And once again, to go over our surrounding states, Iowa currently has a pending bill like this one. Colorado and Wyoming have already passed bills like this one. And if one more state around us passes a bill like LB34 allowing permanent daylight savings time, ours will go into effect if Congress takes action on that Sunshine Protection Act that has been introduced. I'll also reiterate that North Dakota is not a neighboring state of Nebraska. Senator Merman mentioned several times that North Dakota has passed standard time, but that is not a neighboring state. So interesting, but less relevant to our conversation. So I'd urge your support on LB34. We can take this to select file and continue the conversation. And finally, I'll just say this is one of my favorite bills that we do, because I actually think it might be the only actual nonpartisan issue that we discuss. Anything else we do, there is some aspect of taxes or social issues or something that someone has an issue with. But everyone can agree on LB34. Everyone knows this is a good idea. So I was talking to some friends over here, and we were kind of joking that maybe we should have both bills fail so we can keep having this good feeling every year and keep the tradition of talking about daylight savings time and how we hate changing the clocks. And I'll also say, finally, this is probably the bill that I get the most positive constituent feedback on every year. From the very first year when I co-sponsored it with Senator Breezy to this year, we get overwhelming constituent support for stopping the madness. We don't want to change the clocks anymore. So we'll see what we end up doing today. But thank you for your support. Thanks for the conversation today. Nice to have some fellow feeling for an hour or so. And I'd like a call of the House so we can make sure everyone can come and vote. Thank you.
Colleagues, the question before the body is the advancement of LB34 to E&R initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted who care to? Record, Mr. Clerk.
29 ayes, 13 nays, Madam President, on the motion to advance the bill.
The bill is advanced.